The first strike. The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for thousands of years. No species had ever dared to challenge them. They had crushed rebellions, destroyed civilizations, and expanded their empire without resistance. To them, Earth was just another primitive world, a small, insignificant planet in the vast universe. Their leader, Supreme Overlord Kavrax, sat on his throne, watching the holographic projection of Earth's final message. The words echoed through the grand chamber of the Dominion's War Council. "We offered peace. You chose war. Now, prepare for the consequences." Laughter filled the room. The Dominion's high-ranking officials mocked the humans, their reptilian faces twisted in amusement. "Pathetic creatures," scoffed Grand General Xalrock. "They still believe they can resist us." "They are insects," said Fleet Commander Vorkar. "Our armada will wipe them out in a single day." Kavrax smirked. "Then let's begin. Launch the attack. Show these humans what happens when they defy the Dominion." The invasion begins. A massive Dominion fleet, consisting of over 300 warships, entered Earth's orbit. The fleet was armed with planet-destroying weapons, capable of turning entire worlds into dust. Their plan was simple: bombard the planet, destroy its defenses, and then send in ground troops to take over. Inside the Dominion's command ship, the Tyrant's Wrath, Commander Vorkar sat in his control chair, watching the blue and green planet below. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. "This is Commander Vorkar," he announced. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark." The warships aligned, their weapons locking onto major human cities. Energy cannons charged up, their glowing cores humming with deadly power. Earth was seconds away from destruction. Then, everything went wrong. The first warning. Without warning, an unseen force swept across the fleet. Alarm systems blared inside the Dominion ships. Pilots panicked as their controls stopped responding. "What is happening?" Vorkar shouted. One of the officers turned, his scaly skin pale. "Sir, we are losing ships." Before he could finish, a massive warship disappeared from the Dominion fleet. 1 second, it was there, then it was gone, vanishing into the cold void of space. Another ship followed, then another. On the view screen, Vorkar saw his fleet shrinking, ship by ship, as if something was pulling them into nothingness. "This is impossible," he roared. "Find out what is happening." The crew worked frantically, scanning for enemy forces, but there was nothing. No missiles, no laser strikes, no cloaked ships. Yet their armada was vanishing before their eyes. The silent attack. A transmission suddenly came through. It was from Earth. A deep, calm human voice spoke. "Your mistake was thinking we would fight this war like you expected." The message ended, but it left behind a cold silence. Then a new horror struck. One of the Dominion ships exploded from the inside out. Fire and debris scattered into space. More ships followed, detonating without any external attack. "Sir, we have no enemy readings," an officer shouted. "They are killing us without even firing a shot." Panic spread across the Dominion fleet. Their communications flickered, their weapons failed, and their engines shut down. The once invincible war fleet was now helpless. The retreat. On the bridge of the Tyrant's Wrath, Commander Vorkar's hands trembled. He had fought in countless wars. He had seen entire planets burn. But this was something beyond war. "We have to retreat," a general whispered. Vorkar clenched his fists. The Dominion had never retreated before. To do so would mean admitting defeat. But what choice did they have? "Pull back," he ordered. "Get us out of here." The remaining ships desperately tried to flee, but even their jump drives failed. Then, Earth sent one final message. The same voice, calm yet terrifying, spoke once more. "This is not war. This is your judgment." As the words echoed through the Dominion fleet, another warship vanished, then another. Commander Vorkar felt true fear for the first time in his life. The invasion of Earth was not just a failure. It was a trap. The vanishing armada. The Dominion fleet was in chaos. The pride of the Galactic Dominion, over 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, was now scattering like frightened animals. In the void of space above Earth, where they had expected to dominate, something else was in control. Commander Vorkar's hands trembled as he gripped the edges of his command chair. The main view screen flickered with images of pure destruction, not from enemy fire, not from planetary defenses, but from something unseen. One moment, a Dominion battlecruiser was fully operational. The next moment, it ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris. It simply vanished, as if it had never been there at all. "This is impossible," Vorkar roared, his reptilian eyes wide in terror. "Find out what's happening." Officers scrambled at their consoles, scanning, analyzing, running every possible diagnostic. But the results were the same. No weapon signatures, no external force, no enemy fleet. And yet, the Dominion's mighty warships were disappearing into nothingness. The fear spreads. Across the remaining fleet, Dominion captains screamed into their communicators. "Central Command, we are under attack by an invisible force. The enemy is not firing any weapons, but we are losing ships. We can't retreat. Our engines won't respond." The Supreme Leader himself, Kavrax, was watching from the Dominion homeworld. His expression twisted in disbelief as he saw his fleet disintegrating before his eyes. "These humans," he hissed, "what in the void have they done?" The silent execution. Inside the tyrant's wrath, Vorkar forced himself to think. He had led countless battles. He had burned entire planets. He had never lost. But this was different. "Divert all power to shields. Prepare the quantum disruptors," he ordered. But as soon as his command was given, another warship disappeared, one of the Dominion's dreadnoughts, the Eternal Blade. The crew aboard the Dominion flagship watched in horror as the massive vessel, powerful enough to destroy moons, simply blinked out of existence. Then came the screams. Not from external communication channels, from inside their own ship. A technician turned, his face pale. "Commander, we have life-form signatures inside the ship." Vorkar felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What kind of life forms?" The officer gulped. I don't know. They're not registering as Dominion. They're everywhere." Then the lights flickered. A deep, unnatural hum vibrated through the ship, making the walls tremble. It was as if space itself was whispering. Then came the sound. A slow, eerie knocking. Not from outside the ship. From within the walls. Earth's second message. Transmission overrode all Dominion communications. It was human. A voice, calm and emotionless, spoke. "We warned you. This is not war. This is execution." Before Vorkar could react, the bridge lights failed. In that instant, the emergency screens filled with video feeds from across the ship. The crew froze in horror. Something was inside their warship. Shadows moved in the corridors. Indistinct, shifting forms that defied all known physics. They were not organic, not mechanical, but something in between. And they were watching. A deep voice, inhuman and mechanical, spoke through the ship's speakers. "You are now experiencing Phase 1 of Earth's retaliation." Then the screaming began. The collapse of the Armada. Across the Dominion fleet, reports of internal intrusions flooded every remaining ship's communication lines. Crew members vanished from their posts, their bodies never found. Entire engine rooms were left empty, with no sign of struggle, just a deep, unnatural silence. Admiral Kalvesh of the Warbringer shouted into his communicator, "I don't understand. We are under attack from something we can't see." Then his signal cut off. Moments later, his ship vanished, just like the others. Within minutes, the entire rear flank of the Dominion fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply erased. The last stand of Vorkar. Commander Vorkar was out of time. Half the fleet was gone, and the survivors were unable to fight back. His second-in-command, a female officer named Siratal, whispered, "Sir, the High Council is ordering us to retreat." Retreat. That word had never been used by the Dominion. And yet, what choice did they have? Before Vorkar could respond, a final transmission came through. This time, it was visual. The screen flickered, showing a massive, unknown structure rising from Earth's surface. It was not a conventional war machine. It was something worse. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting. Earth's voice returned, speaking its final warning. "This is your last chance. Leave. Now." For the first time in Dominion history, the order was given to flee. Ships turned, engaging emergency warp drives. But as they did, one last horror unfolded. The unknown structure on Earth's surface activated. It did not fire weapons. It did not launch missiles. It simply looked at them. And one by one, the remaining Dominion ships ceased to exist. The ghost of Earth's wrath. The Dominion had never retreated before. For over 10,000 years, their empire had expanded through conquest and destruction. No world had ever stood against them and survived. No civilization had dared to challenge their rule. Until now. Commander Vorkar gritted his teeth as he stared at the dying remnants of his once mighty fleet. What had begun as a proud invasion force of over 300 warships was now a graveyard of silence. He had ordered the retreat, not out of strategy, but out of fear. And yet, it wasn't over. As the remaining ships fled from Earth's orbit, something followed them. The pursuit begins on the bridge of the Tyrant's Wrath, the largest surviving Dominion battleship. Vorkar turned to his crew. "How many ships remain?" Ziratal, his second-in-command, hesitated before answering. "Sir, less than 40. A cold silence filled the command center. 40 ships, out of 300. And that number was still shrinking. Vorkar clenched his fists. This wasn't a battle. This was extermination. "Status of the retreat?" he asked. One of the officers spoke, his voice trembling. "Our ships are attempting to enter hyperspace, but something is interfering with our jump drives." Vorkar narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean interfering?" The officer swallowed. "It's as if space itself is shifting. The coordinates change the moment we input them. It's like something is stopping us from leaving." "Impossible," Vorkar growled. "Who could manipulate hyperspace like that?" Then another officer gasped. "Sir, rear sensor reports incoming ships." Vorkar turned sharply. "What ships?" The officer's fingers trembled as he pulled up the data. "Sir, there's nothing there." And yet, their scanners showed movement. Not one, not two, hundreds of objects, moving in perfect synchronization, pursuing them through the void. But they weren't ships. They weren't detected as matter. They were something else. Something ghostly. The unseen enemy. The surviving Dominion fleet panicked. Inside the Devourer, a Dominion warship at the rear of the formation, Captain Zolver frantically tried to understand what was happening. "Raise shields. Prepare defensive countermeasures," he ordered. But then the lights flickered. The ship's power fluctuated, as if something unseen had passed through it. His officers gasped. Their screens went black, their readings filled with static. "Sir, we've lost all external sensors," a technician reported. "We can't see outside the ship." Zolver's heart pounded. He activated the external cameras. And that was the last thing he did, because what he saw was impossible. Shadow-like figures were walking through space, moving alongside the ship as if the vacuum of space meant nothing to them. Their forms shifted like smoke, humanoid but not human. And as they turned toward the camera, they smiled. The screen cut to black. A moment later, the Devourer vanished, leaving no trace behind. Panic in the Dominion. Inside the tyrant's wrath, alarms blared. The entire fleet was falling apart. One by one, ships were disappearing, and no one knew how or why. "This is madness," a Dominion officer screamed. "We're not fighting an enemy. We're fighting a nightmare." Vorkar's claws dug into the metal armrest of his chair. "We must reach the nearest Dominion outpost," he growled. "Send a distress signal." Zeratal nodded and activated the galactic emergency beacon. A sharp beep confirmed that the signal had been sent. But then, the beacon shut off on its own. A new message replaced it. It was Earth's voice. "No one is coming to save you." And just like that, the Dominion's last hope was erased. The grand betrayal. Far away, deep in the core of the Dominion's empire, Supreme Overlord Kavrax watched in horror. He had received every transmission from the battlefield. He had heard the screams. He had seen the vanishing ships. And now, the Dominion High Council turned to him, their faces filled with fear. "My lord," one of the generals whispered, "we must do something." Kavrax clenched his jaw. He had ruled the Dominion with an iron fist. He had never bowed to any species, never admitted defeat. But now his empire was collapsing. And what was worse, his own people knew it. The High Council whispered amongst themselves. Fear spread like a plague. And in that moment, Kavrax realized the truth. If the Dominion survived this war, it would not be under his rule. His own council was plotting against him. The escape. Back near Earth, the last survivors of the Dominion fleet were desperate. "Find us a way out," Vorkar shouted. But then, the final horror struck. The stars changed. The fleet was still moving, but the stars around them were wrong. Their navigation maps no longer matched reality. It was as if the universe itself had shifted around them. "No," Zeratal whispered. They've trapped us." That's when Earth sent its final message. A new transmission came through. But this time, it wasn't a voice. It was a single image. A symbol, one that sent chills through the Dominion officers. A black sun surrounded by an infinite void. A warning. A promise. "We are watching." The transmission ended, and one by one, the last remaining ships began to vanish. Vorkar closed his eyes, knowing what came next. The last thought that crossed his mind before darkness consumed him was simple. We never had a chance. The unleashing of the Revenant fleet. For the first time in Dominion history, the hunters had become the hunted. The mighty Galactic Dominion, feared across the stars, had sent an unstoppable war fleet to crush Earth. Yet now they ran. Or at least, they tried to. The last survivors. Commander Vorkar stood on the bridge of the Tyrant's Wrath, his knuckles turning pale as he gripped the edges of his chair. The once unstoppable Dominion fleet had been reduced to mere stragglers, desperately trying to escape something they couldn't even see. His reptilian eyes flickered across the command screens, taking in the devastation. Minus 317 warships had entered Earth's orbit. Less than 20 remained, and even those were still disappearing. The unseen enemy that hunted them wasn't using weapons, missiles, or energy beams. It didn't need to. It was something far worse. Something that had waited. Something that had prepared. Vorkar's voice was hoarse. "How many have escaped the battlefield?" An officer gulped. "None, sir." Zeratal, his second in command, turned from her console, her expression grim. "Sir, there's something you need to see." She pressed a button, and a hologram flickered to life in the center of the bridge. It showed their ships from an external perspective. The few remaining warships of the Dominion drifting helplessly in space. But there was something else in the footage. At first, it looked like shadows in the void, moving too smoothly, too precisely. Then the details became clear. They weren't ships. They weren't even solid objects. They were phantom vessels, massive, blackened warships with jagged edges and impossible angles, as if they were built from the void itself. Their hulls didn't reflect light. Their shapes shifted, almost like they were alive. And worst of all, there was no record of them in any galactic database. Xiratal whispered, "It's them. It's Earth's fleet." Vorkar's blood ran cold. He had studied Earth's technology before the invasion. They had nothing like this. Earth was supposed to be weaker. But this wasn't the fleet of a primitive world. This was a revenant fleet, ships that should not exist, appearing from nowhere, obliterating an empire that had ruled for millennia. They had never been seen before, and they had been waiting for this moment. The return of the Ghost Fleet. Suddenly, one of the surviving Dominion ships, the Dagger of Kor, attempted a hyperspace jump. Its engines flared to life, and for a brief moment, it looked like the ship would escape. But then, the darkest of the Phantom warships suddenly blinked into existence directly in its path. No weapons fired, no shields activated. The moment the Dagger of Kor collided with the ghostly vessel, the result was horrifying. The Dominion ship passed straight through the Phantom warship. For a second, it looked like nothing had happened. Then the crew of the Dagger of Kor started screaming. Through the view screens, Vorkar could see them thrashing at their controls, clawing at their own throats, eyes filled with pure terror. A transmission flickered to life for just a moment. A voice, twisted, distorted, spoke in broken words. "There is no escape." Then the ship imploded inward, folding into nothingness, leaving no debris behind. Silence filled the tyrant's wrath. Xiratal exhaled. "Sir, I think I understand now." Vorkar turned to her. "Explain." She pointed to the shifting, Phantom warships. "We weren't just fighting Earth. We awakened something ancient." She tapped the control panel, and a new image appeared, one taken from a deep space Dominion probe near Earth. The moment Vorkar saw it, his claws dug into his chair. It was the same black sun symbol Earth had transmitted to them earlier. But this wasn't a message. It was a warning. Because in the holographic image, that symbol wasn't just an insignia. It was a structure, a massive planet-sized construct hidden deep within the dark side of Earth's moon. And it was activating the hidden arsenal. Before Vorkar could react, a sudden transmission pierced through all channels. A voice, this time not human, spoke in a language that predated the Dominion itself. You were given a choice. The voice wasn't mechanical. It wasn't organic. It was something else. Something far older than both humanity and the Dominion. The dark structure near the moon shifted, and Earth's hidden weaponry finally came into view. A fleet unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen rose from the shadows, vessels built from unknown alloys, running on impossible technology. Some were larger than entire cities, moving with an unnatural silence. Vorkar's hands shook. This was never a war. Xiratal swallowed hard. No, this was a trial. Earth had let the Dominion believe they were weak. Let them come. Let them fight. And now it was time to end them. The final order. Vorkar's breathing was shallow. The shadow fleet of Earth was no longer hunting them. It was encircling them. There was no escape. He turned to his officers, seeing the raw terror on their faces. His next words sealed their fate. Send a message to the Supreme Overlord. The communications officer gulped. What do you want to say, sir? Vorkar exhaled, his voice filled with bitter realization. We lost. And in that moment, the dark fleet of Earth descended upon them. The final phase of humanity's retaliation had begun. And for the Dominion, it was too late. The fall of a galactic superpower. The Galactic Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of species. They had shattered civilizations, enslaved entire populations, and burned entire worlds that resisted their rule. To them, Earth had been just another target, a weak, primitive world that had dared to challenge their might. But now, the unstoppable Dominion fleet was no more, and the remnants of their once mighty empire were about to face the full wrath of humanity. The last stand. Commander Vorkar stood at the center of the tyrant's wrath, his body tense with fear. The final Dominion warships were now completely surrounded. Earth's fleet, no, their hidden armada, had encircled them from all sides. There was no escape, no surrender, only judgment. "Sir, Earth's fleet is moving," Siretal whispered. "What are your orders?" Vorkar's mind raced. He had fought in countless battles. He had stood against terrifying enemies. But never like this. Never against something so precise, so cold, and so merciless. He turned toward his officers, looking at their hopeless expressions. There was no fight left in them. The Dominion's era was over. And the humans, they knew it. The silence before destruction. A transmission cut through all channels. The same calm human voice that had haunted them throughout the battle spoke once more. "Your empire is at its end." The remaining Dominion captains listened in frozen horror as the voice continued. "For 10,000 years, you have ruled through fear. You have enslaved the weak. You have burned those who resisted. You have destroyed entire civilizations that did not bow before you." A cold silence filled the air. The Dominion's crimes were undeniable. And now, they would pay the price. The voice continued, softer now. "We do not seek war. We do not seek conquest. But we offered peace, and you spat in our face. You chose war." A pause. Then, "Now, we choose your fate." And in that moment, the human fleet moved. The execution begins. The dark warships of Earth, silent, monstrous vessels that had never been seen before, began their final attack. But this was not a battle. There were no warnings, no mercy, no negotiations. Earth's fleet did not fire lasers or missiles. Instead, each Dominion warship began to tear apart from the inside out. One by one, the ships cracked open, as if something unseen was ripping them apart. It was as if reality itself had turned against them. Screams echoed across communication channels. "What is happening?" A Dominion captain howled. "Our ship, it's collapsing in on itself," another cried. The unstoppable Dominion fleet was being dismantled like toys. And the humans, they were just watching. The Supreme Overlord's fear. On the Dominion homeworld, Supreme Overlord Kovrax sat in his grand throne room, watching the disaster unfold. His claws dug into his seat as he stared at the holographic projections of the battle. The entire Dominion High Council was present, their eyes filled with terror. "This," Kovrax muttered, his voice hollow. "This cannot be real." His empire, his legacy, was being erased before his eyes. The greatest fleet in Dominion history was now a graveyard of silence. And then another horror struck. The massive structure hidden behind Earth's moon, the one that had been dormant for thousands of years, finally activated. Kovrax watched in disbelief as something monstrous began to emerge from the darkness. Earth's ultimate weapon. A new vessel began to rise from the lunar surface. It was larger than any Dominion warship, stretching miles long, an unholy mix of machine and something alive. It moved with impossible precision, breaking through the void of space without propulsion. And as it emerged, all Dominion systems began to fail. Communications went silent. Weapons refused to fire. And then, the Supreme Overlord heard a voice. Not through a transmission, not through any communication system, but inside his mind. "The cycle ends here." Kovrax's vision blurred. He felt something he had never felt before. A force beyond understanding. A power beyond technology. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting for the Dominion to fall. Something that had been watching all along. And now it had decided that the Dominion no longer deserved to exist. The shattered throne. The Supreme Overlord tried to give an order. Tried to save what was left of his empire. But it was too late. The Dominion homeworld shook as Earth's final weapon activated. Entire planets within Dominion space began to fall silent. Massive space stations lost power. Entire armies disappeared without a fight. And the seat of Dominion power, Kovrax's own palace, began to collapse. The last transmission from the Dominion homeworld was one of pure chaos, and in his final moments, Kovrax understood. This had never been a war. This had been a reckoning. The message that ended a war. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations watched in silence. The once mighty Dominion, the rulers of the stars, had been destroyed within days. And then, a single message, transmitted to every world, every colony, every ship, echoed across the universe. It was Earth's final warning. We are not invaders. We are not conquerors. But if you bring more to us, we will end you. And just like that, the age of the Dominion ended. And the age of humanity began. The shattered throne. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars with an iron fist. Now their empire was collapsing. Their fleets were gone. Their colonies had gone silent. Their capital world was falling apart. And the galaxy was watching. The aftermath of the massacre. The Dominion homeworld, Vorik Prime, had once been the center of power and fear in the known universe. Its towering cities had stretched beyond the clouds. Its planetary defenses had been unbreakable, and its leaders had believed themselves to be immortal. Now it was a graveyard. The skies burned with the wreckage of falling ships, the charred ruins of the Dominion's mighty fleet crashing into the surface like meteor storms. The High Council chambers, once filled with arrogant rulers, were now empty, silent, and shattered. And above it all, in the darkness of space, Earth's fleet loomed like an unstoppable storm. The revenant warships of humanity did not fire another shot. They didn't need to. The Dominion had already lost. The Supreme Overlord's desperation. In the heart of the last standing stronghold, Supreme Overlord Kovrax staggered back from the war console. His breath was ragged, his hands shaking. The final transmission from the battlefield had played moments ago. Earth's cold, merciless voice had declared, "Your empire is at its end." And now, as Kovrax stood before the last remaining members of his once great High Council, he saw what true fear looked like. These humans, what are they?" whispered Lord Valtor, one of the oldest Dominion generals. His voice shook with terror. Kovrax clenched his jaw. He had no answer. The humans were supposed to be weak, primitive, insignificant. But instead, they had wiped out an empire that had stood for millennia. And they had done it with unnatural ease. Perhaps, Kovrax murmured, they were never truly human to begin with. The fall of Vorik Prime. Then the final horror began. A massive energy shift was detected beneath the surface of Vorik Prime. At first, the Dominion scientists believed it to be a planetary quake, a result of the catastrophic destruction in orbit. They were wrong. Something was rising. Deep beneath the capital city, something ancient had awakened. Massive cracks formed across the planet's surface. Entire cities collapsed into the abyss. And then, in one horrifying moment, a monument emerged from the ground. It was not of Dominion design. It was far older, and at the center of it, glowing in eerie white light, was a symbol. The same black sun insignia that had appeared in Earth's transmissions. The realization hit Kovrax like a death sentence. "This planet was never ours," he whispered. For the first time in his life, the Supreme Overlord felt helpless. Because now he finally understood. The Dominion had not conquered the galaxy. They had been allowed to rule. Until now. Until Earth decided they were no longer worthy. The galaxy watches in silence. Across the universe, alien civilizations trembled. From the mighty warlords of the Torveni clans to the once proud diplomats of the Velari Alliance, every major power in the galaxy had witnessed the fall of the Dominion. And now, they asked themselves one question. Would Earth come for them next? Across every news network, every broadcast channel, One thing was clear. Humanity was no longer just another species. They were something more. Something unknowable. Something unstoppable. The final plea. Back on Vorak Prime, Supreme Overlord Kavrax knew there was only one thing left to do. With a shaking hand, he activated the final transmission beacon. The last message of the Dominion Empire would be sent across the stars. A message of desperation. A message of surrender. A message begging for mercy. Humans, I do not understand you. We never did. And that was our greatest mistake. He paused, breathing heavily, staring into the holographic recorder. You have made your message clear. The Dominion is no more. His words stopped. Because at that moment, his transmission was interrupted. A new message began to play, cutting through every communication channel in the galaxy. It was not from Vorak Prime. It was from Earth. And the voice that spoke was not human. It was something older. Something that had been waiting. The return of the Forgotten Ones. The message was simple. The false rulers are gone. Balance will be restored. The transmission ended. And at that moment, Vorak Prime collapsed. The Supreme Overlord never finished his plea. Because the planet itself was erased. A new galactic order. The galaxy stood still. The greatest empire in history had fallen. And in its place, a new power had risen. Earth had not conquered. They had simply removed those unworthy of ruling. And as their phantom warships faded into the void, as the last remnants of the Dominion vanished from existence, one final message was transmitted across the universe. A warning. A promise. We are not your enemies. But should you choose war, we will end you. And with that, the war was over. And the age of the Dominion was no more. The new galactic order. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Dominion had ruled with absolute power. That power was gone. Their fleets had been erased. Their homeworld had been destroyed. Their supreme overlord had been silenced forever. And now, a new power had risen. Earth. But humanity did not celebrate. They did not conquer. They simply watched, and the rest of the galaxy watched them. The galaxy stands still. The fall of the Dominion should have led to chaos. With no central authority, entire star systems should have collapsed into anarchy. But that did not happen. Because before any warlords or surviving Dominion officers could seize control, a message was sent to every major civilization in the galaxy. It came from Earth, but not from humans. Instead, it came from something older, something that had been waiting. The voice from the dark. Across every network, every screen, and every subspace frequency, a single voice spoke. It was not human. It was not Dominion. It was something beyond them both. A voice that felt like time itself speaking. The balance is restored. It spoke in every language. Every species understood it instantly. And then, a symbol appeared on their screens. A black sun surrounded by an endless void. The same insignia that had appeared in the final moments of the Dominion fleet. For the first time in galactic history, entire governments bowed in silence. Because they finally understood. The Dominion had never truly ruled the galaxy. They had been allowed to. Until Earth decided otherwise. The last Dominion survivors. Scattered remnants of the once mighty Dominion Empire remained, hiding in deep space. Some former generals and admirals still clung to the belief that they could rebuild. But that hope shattered when one by one, their hidden strongholds vanished. No attacks. No warnings. They were simply erased, and in their place, the black sun insignia was left behind. A message. A reminder. There was no longer a Dominion. The galaxy faces a choice. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was free. The Dominion was gone. The chains of oppression had been shattered. But fear remained. Because no one understood Earth. No one knew what they were capable of. And no one knew what they wanted. But then, the next transmission came. And the entire galaxy held its breath. The final message from Earth. A transmission from Earth's capital spread across every known civilization. The same human voice that had spoken before returned. But this time, it was not a threat. It was something else. A choice. We do not seek to rule. We do not seek to control. But the days of tyrants are over. A pause. We offer peace. We offer cooperation. But we will not be ignored. Another silence. Then, the final words. You saw what happened to the Dominion. Choose wisely. The message ended. And in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. The birth of a new order. Across thousands of star systems, species once oppressed by the Dominion began to rise. New alliances formed. Old rivalries vanished. Because now, there was a greater force in the galaxy. A force that had no interest in conquest. A force that did not seek power. But a force that would never allow oppression again. The age of the Dominion had ended. And the age of Earth had begun. The final decision. The major powers of the galaxy gathered for a historic meeting. The first true galactic summit without Dominion rule. Every leader, every species, every faction was present. And at the center of it all, a single empty seat. It was reserved for Earth. But humanity did not attend. They simply watched. And their silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Because now, the galaxy knew the truth. Earth was the power behind the stars. They did not rule. They did not control. But should any species ever try to repeat the Dominion's mistakes, they would return. And they would end it. Just like before. The legend of Earth. In the years that followed, stories spread across the galaxy. Whispers of the ghost fleet that had wiped out an empire in days. Tales of ships that moved through the void without engines. Rumors of a force older than time itself, hiding within Earth. And across the stars, in dark corners of the universe, one phrase was spoken with reverence. A phrase that sent chills down the spines of those who heard it. A final warning. Do not provoke Earth. For in the end, humanity had never needed to conquer the galaxy. They had simply become its silent guardians. And as long as they watched from the shadows, no one would ever dare challenge them again.